We have a student today, Barb?
Yes, we do. Would you like me to take roll call first?
Yes, please.
All right. Mr. Beckett?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
I'm here.
Mr. Navarro Jr.?
Here.
I don't think. Oh, great. Ms. Villanueva?
Here.
And President Rice.
Here.
Great. And then we do have a student named Pablo, and we have assistant principal from Hoover, Miss Jordan, here to introduce him.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan, for joining us.
Thank you, Ms. Rice.
So if you could introduce your student, and then we will get started with the pledge. Mrs. Fiscus will put the flag up on the screen, and as soon as your student is ready to begin the pledge, please instruct Pablo to do so whenever he's ready.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm Mrs. Jordan, the assistant principal at Hoover Elementary, and I'm honored to have one of our fifth grade here to start the Pledge of Allegiance for you. And his name is Pablo Barrera Madrigal. And I'm going to leave it right up to you, Pablo. So we'll wait for the flag.
Yo prometo lealtad a la bandera. Yo prometo lealtad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios y visible con libertad y justicia para todos. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pablo. That was very nice. You did a great job, and in Spanish too. If you could hold on just a second, I know that there are board members who want to thank you personally, and they may be wanting to ask you a question or two, okay? Okay, Graciela, please.
Hi, Pablo. My name is Graciela. Thank you for being here with us. You did a great job on the Pledge of Allegiance. Your Spanish is very, very good. You think you probably speak Spanish better than I do. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What grade are you in? And tell me about your Facebook.
I'm in fifth grade, go to Hoover Elementary, and I like a lot of stuff, but the most thing that I like, in school, I like math a lot, and some sports that I like are soccer and football.
Awesome. And what's your favorite book?
My favorite book is The Watsons Go to Birmingham.
What was that? Again?
The Watsons Go to Birmingham.
The Watsons Go to Birmingham? Very cool.
Yes.
Well, thank you for being here. And again, great job on the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you.
Okay, Raymond.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Pablo. My name is Raymond. And just wanted to thank you for your time and for your leadership with us today. Graciela is correct. Your Spanish is amazing. So I wish I could speak Spanish like you do, and English. So good job. I just wanted to know, what are your dreams when you grow up, right? What is it that you want to do, you see yourself doing as in the future?
I'm thinking of becoming a soccer player, and then when I get old, I would retire and go for being president or government.
Nice. A politician, right? Wow, that'd be awesome. Well, you certainly do have the skills to be a servant leader, a civic leader. So again, thank you so much, and very nice meeting you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Norm.
Hi, Pablo. Gracias por tu ayuda hoy. Just have a couple questions for you. What's one of the things you're looking forward to in middle school next year?
I'm thinking of joining a type of team or like playing in their sports.
Okay, so sports is one thing that's important to you. What's one thing you're going to miss from Hoover?
There's a lot of nice stuff, but normally recess.
Oh, you got recess. Yeah, you won't have recess in middle school, will you? That'll be
Not
a
much.
big change, huh? Yeah, it's nice to have those breaks in the day. Well, being a soccer player and a president are two really important things, and in both of them, you have to put your best foot forward all the time, don't you? So I wish you
Yes.
well in your future dreams and in your future education. Thanks again for being here today.
Thank you.
And Ryan.
Hi, Pablo.
Hi.
I just want to wish you the absolute best for the rest of this school year, and I want to say thank you very much for being with us tonight and helping us with the Pledge of Allegiance. We really appreciate you, and we are going to be rooting for you for the rest of your education here in the Yakima School District.
Thank you.
Pablo, I too want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. I know that you have other things that are probably tugging at you and saying, pay attention to me. So if you feel like you need to leave and sign out of this meeting, we won't be offended. We understand that our students have other things that they need to pay attention to, but you're welcome to stay if you'd like to stay, but we understand if you need to leave.
I can stay.
Oh, good. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Mrs. Jordan, thank you so much for, did I get your name right?
Yes, you did.
Thank you so much for being with us today and for introducing Pablo to us.
Absolutely.
We very much appreciate all that you do as a staff member to support the students at at Hoover.
And thank you for the opportunity to do that. It was my privilege.
So if you want to stay, you're more than welcome to stay. But if you need to leave, we completely understand that you need to leave.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm still having trouble getting the agenda up.
The next item is the land acknowledgement, and Mr. Navarro Jr. is prepared to read that.
Thank you, Barb.
You bet.
Raymond?
I'm not sure if I'm prepared yet, but I'll find
Oh, oops,
it.
sorry.
No.
I'll show it on the screen for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Here it comes.
Yes, thank you. It's my pleasure to read the Yakima Land Acknowledgement. Today, the schools of the Yakima School District rest on the ancestral lands of the 14 confederated tribes and bands of the Yakima Nation. The people of the Yakima Nation inhabited more than 12 million acres across Adams, Benton, Chelan, Douglas, Franklin, Grant, Kittitas, Klickitat, and Yakima counties. Excuse me. Today, we honor those Native people who are tied to the land through history, legends, and culture. We acknowledge their descendants who live in the world today. We thank the caretakers of this land who have lived here and continue to live here since time immemorial. An acknowledgement is a simple, powerful way to show respect and a step towards correcting the stories and practices that erase Indigenous people's history and culture. It also honors the truth. As a school district, we will continue to build upon our relations with the Yakima Nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. I'm still having trouble. Barb, what's next on the agenda?
You bet. We have 4 proclamations tonight. The first one we're going to ask Mr. Beckett to read. It's the Career and Technical Education Month Proclamation.
Thank
Thank
you, Barb.
you.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Ryan.
A proclamation from the state of Washington. whereas February 2022 has been designated Career and Technical Education Month by the Association for Career and Technical Education, and whereas career and technical education offers students the opportunity to gain the academic, technical, and employability skills necessary for true career readiness, and whereas students in CTE programs participate in authentic, meaningful experiences that improve the quality of their education and increase their engagement and achievement, and whereas CTE provides students with career exploration opportunities earlier in their educational experience, which enables them to make informed and beneficial decisions about their academic coursework and pursue established programs of study and career pathways. And whereas leaders from business and industry nationwide report increasing challenges related to addressing the skills gap that connecting qualified professionals with available careers in critical and growing CTE-related fields, including construction, healthcare, energy, advanced manufacturing, and information technology. And whereas offering integrated programs of study that link secondary and post-secondary education leads to the attainment of industry-recognized credentials, and whereas ensuring that employers have access to a qualified workforce is a crucial step in ensuring productivity among the business and industry communities, as well as continued economic growth and competitiveness. And whereas February 23, 2022 marks the 105th anniversary of the signing of the Smith-Hughes Vocational Education Act of 1917, which was the first major federal investment in secondary CTE and laid the foundation for the bipartisan bicameral support for CTE that continues today. Therefore, Jay Inslee, the governor of the state of Washington, proclaims February 2022 as Career and Technical Education Month in Washington, and he encourages all people in our state to join him in this special observance.
Thank you, Ryan. Our next proclamation is for National Black History Month. Raymond, are you prepared to read this for us?
Yes, I am. And it's a rather lengthy one. So,
Yes, it is.
yeah.
Thank you
So-
for doing that.
So this is a proclamation on National Black History Month from President Biden. Each February, National Black History Month serves as both a celebration and a powerful reminder that Black history is American history. Black history is American culture, and Black stories are essentially the ongoing story of America. Our faults, our struggles, our progress, and our aspirations. Shining a light on Black history today is as important to understanding ourselves and growing stronger as a nation as it has ever been. That is why it is essential that we take time to celebrate the immeasurable contributions of Black Americans, honor the legacies and achievements of generations past, reckon with centuries of injustice, and confront those injustices that still fester today. Our nation was founded on an idea that all of us are created equal and deserve to be treated with equal, dignity throughout our lives. It is a promise we will never fully live up to, but one we have never ever walked away from. The long shadows of slavery, Jim Crow, and redlining, and the blight of systemic racism that still diminishes our nation today hold America back from reaching our full promise and potential. But by facing those tragedies openly and honestly and working together as one people to deliver on America's promise of equity and dignity for all, we become a stronger nation, a more perfect version of ourselves. Across the generations, countless Black Americans have demonstrated profound moral courage and resilience to help shape our nation for the better. Today, Black Americans lead industries and movements for change, serve our communities and our nation at every level, and advance every field across the board, including arts, sciences, business and law, health and education, and many more. In the face of wounds and obstacles older than our nation itself, Black Americans can be seen in every part of our society today, strengthening and uplifting all of America. Vice President Harris and I are deeply committed to advancing equity, racial justice, and opportunity for Black Americans as we continue striving to realize America's founding promise that began by building a federal government that looks like America, including the first Black Secretary of Defense, the first Black woman to lead the Office of Management and Budget, the first Black man to lead the Environmental Protection Agency, and the first Black woman to lead the Department of Housing and Urban Development in more than 40 years, the first Black chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors, a Black ambassador representing America at the United Nations, and the first Black and Southeast Asian vice president in our history. We have been proud to appoint accomplished Black Americans to serve in a vast array of roles across our administration. I am proud still to have nominated 8 Black women to serve as federal appellate judges, matching in 1 year the total number of Black women who have ever served on federal appeals courts. My administration has worked hard to reverse decades of underinvestment in Black communities, schools, and businesses. Both the American Rescue Plan and bipartisan infrastructure law are making historic investments in Black America, from vaccine shots in arms to checks in families' pockets and tax cuts for working families with children to a landmark $5.8 billion investment in and support for historically Black colleges and universities. And in my first year in office, the American Rescue Plan provided the full child tax credits to the lower income families of more than 26 million children who are disproportionately Black, and put us on path to cut Black child poverty in half. As the infrastructure law continues to be implemented, we will expand on that progress. Lead service lines that have been contaminated, the water of too many homes and schools in Black communities will be removed and replaced. We will deliver high-speed internet to every community so that no Black family is left behind in the 21st century economy. Historic investments in public transportation will help more people in more neighborhoods to get where good jobs actually are quickly and safely. We will connect Black neighborhoods cut off from opportunity by highways that were built to brush them aside. Long-standing environmental injustices that have hit Black communities the hardest will be remediated. We will deliver major investments in Black entrepreneurs and small businesses, including making the Minority Business Development Agency permanent and seeding it with a record $110 million in new resources to help level the playing field for Black businesses. But this is only the start. To fulfill America's promises for all, we will work tirelessly in the year ahead to deliver on my Black Build Back Better agenda, bringing down the costs and that families face on childcare, housing, education, healthcare, prescription drugs, and much more. We will continue to battle COVID-19 pandemic with equity at the center of our response. We will not rest until we have protected the foundation of our democracy, the sacred right to vote. And we will fight to keep dismantling all of those structural inequalities that have served as barriers for Black families for generations. As we celebrate National Black History Month, let us all recommit ourselves to reach for the founding promise. Let us continue to fight for equity, opportunity, and dignity to which every Black American is due in equal measure. Let us carry forward the work to build an America that is, in the beautiful words of the poet Amanda Gorman, bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce, and free. Now, therefore, I, Joseph R. Biden Jr., President of the United States of America, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and the laws of the United States, do hereby proclaim February 2022 as National Black History Month. I call upon the public officials, educators, librarians, and all the people of the United States to observe this month with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. In witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand this 31st day of January in the year of our Lord 2022 and the independence of the United States of America, the 246th. Joseph R. Biden Jr.
Thank you, Raymond. That was a pretty lengthy proclamation. I appreciate you reading that for us. Next, we have National PTA recognition. Graciela, are you prepared to read that for us?
The National PTA celebrates 125 years. Founded on February 17, 1897, the National PTA is the oldest and largest child advocacy association in America and has been the conscience of the country on issues affecting children and youth. Today's PTA is a network of millions of families, students, teachers, administrators, and business and community leaders devoted to the educational success of children and the promotion of family engagement in schools. One of the most important parts of ensuring our children receive the best possible education is cultivating a strong partnership between parents and teachers. When parents and teachers work together to improve their children's education, our students get the support they need to fulfill the potential of their bright futures. In honor of National PTA Founders Day, the Yakima School District Board of Directors would like to acknowledge the substantial role that PTA and other parent groups have played locally, regionally, and nationally in supporting parent involvement and working on behalf of all children and families. Thank you. Dated the 7th day of February 2022, Yakima School District Board of Directors.
Thank you, Graciela. And our last proclamation today is for School Counseling Week proclamation. Norm, are you prepared to read this for us?
I am. The State of Washington proclamation. Whereas school counselors are employed in public and private schools to help students reach their full potential, and whereas school counselors are actively committed to helping students explore their abilities, strengths, interests, and talents as these traits relate to career awareness and development, and whereas school counselors help parents focus on ways to further the educational, personal, and social growth of their children, and whereas school counselors work with teachers and other educators to help students explore their potential and set realistic goals for themselves, and whereas school counselors seek to identify and utilize community resources that can enhance and complement comprehensive school counseling programs and help students become productive members of society, and whereas comprehensive developmental school counseling programs are considered an integral part of the educational process that enables all students to achieve success in school. Now, therefore, I, Jay Inslee, Governor of the State of Washington, do hereby proclaim February 7th through 11th, 2022 as School Counseling Week in Washington, and I encourage all people in our state to join me in this special observance. Signs this 10th day of January, 2022, Jay Inslee, Governor of the State of Washington. And I would just like to throw a plug in for our school counselors. We deeply appreciate your work, and keep it up.
Thank you, Norm. Next, we have board reports, and today's report is on our special education program. Mr. Superintendent, do you want to lead into this or just turn this over to Joni?
Actually, I would like to pass it to Dr. Darling for the lead-in.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Green and School Board. It's my pleasure to introduce our special education department tonight. We have Executive Director Joni Coe, and she has invited Assistant Director Danny Frazier, Assistant Director Tammy Turner, and also her admin intern, Mr. John Solo, to be here this evening. So I'll turn the time over to Joni.
Thank you for being here, Joni.
Thank you so much for inviting us. And I want to just add one more name. We have Jamie Johnson, who's here. She's our principal for early learning for the remainder of the year. And she's joining us today in case any of the board members had questions regarding our early learning program. So I especially want to thank my team and to let you all know, I am so proud of the work that we do. I have an incredible group of directors and leaders in our department. Dr. Darling has made sure that we are supported in our programming needs, and he's helping us with our work this year as we move forward. And I'll share that work with you on our next slide. So thank you. So director started working with Eric Baltz a little earlier this year, and we were revisiting our mission and vision statement. And the statement that you see before you is our new mission and vision statement, and it reflects the work that directors are doing. We're providing the resources and professional development support to our staff in order for our students to access general education instruction in their least restrictive environment. It's our vision that every child, every day feels empowered, connected, supported, and engaged. So, as you know, special education addresses the unique needs of our student population, and it's for those students that are found eligible to receive services. There's no cost to parents. It includes related services and student needs that they would need to access their educational program. We have the 0 to 2 program, the early support for infants and toddlers. Most of these services are provided through our community partners. This program provides services to students and families in homes, childcare, preschool, and in the community. Then our school-age children, which are 3 to 21, these services are provided to eligible students that are on an IEP in our preschool settings, elementary, secondary, and other settings that might be appropriate. And I just wanted to give you kind of an idea of the number of programs and buildings that we serve. We have the 14 elementary schools, 5 middle schools, the 3 high schools, but we also have online alternative, the group homes, private schools, home hospital. We serve the juvenile detention center and also the adult jail. So we have a number of settings that we provide these services in addition to our preschool program. Areas of eligibility, you'll see we have, there should be 13 areas of eligibility that are listed here. Deafness is now including hard of hearing. They're going to be combining those here in the next month or so. You'll see that change coming through. So these are just the areas of eligibility. Next slide. But in order for a student to be eligible, they have to meet the 3 criteria. They have to have a disability or disabilities. Their disability has to it must adversely affect their educational performance. And the student's needs cannot be addressed through education in a general classroom alone. Even with or without accommodations, they require specially designed instruction. So all of the students that are receiving services through our program meet all 3 prongs of eligibility. This is our K-21 enrollment. So this does not include our preschool students. If you take a look at the chart, you'll see from 2017 up through 2022, we've increased the number of students that we're serving. and the variety of programs has also increased. You'll see that a little bit later on. We're looking at pre-K enrollment, and I'd like to just point out a couple of things. This is 2017 through present 2022. You'll notice that last year, 2021, our numbers were down slightly. We do believe that was due to COVID. We didn't have the number of referrals, or we had families where they had 3-year-olds and they were not, they did not want services at that time, but they're starting to come back to us as 4-year-olds. So you'll see that we're at 182 right now. January through summer is where we see a large increase in that number of students, and we anticipate that we would be back up around our 2019-2020 numbers when we finish off the year. So for our service delivery models, this is for our 3-year-olds through age 21. I have to tell you, we have incredible people that are serving in these programs. These are all programs where we have classrooms where a student that would that may have autism or behavior issues or deaf ed, etc. We have full day programs that we can offer, but we also have inclusion for those students to the greatest extent possible. And we're really working on that to increase the opportunities for our students to have access to their general ed curriculum. If you look again at the related services down below, that we have audiology, not all districts offer that. We have vision to include orientation and mobility. So that would be our students that are learning to use a cane. So we have some services that are unique to Yakima. And again, we're very proud of those. So we look at our funding. This is our federal funding for special education. We 3.3 million there. You'll see we also have ESSER funds that we're using. And right now, those ESSER funds are dedicated to our contracted support staff. We have a shortage of parapros, and as you know, we need support staff for both safety and for our students to be able to access their education. So that's what we're using those funds for. We have a Medicaid reimbursement for the 2021 school year, and then safety net, and this is just federal. Our portion of safety net was at $33,000 that you see there. The next slide you'll see is the state funding for special education finances. We get about 12.6% for our K-21. Max, you can have up to 13.5% of your population that's funded for special education services. And we've been consistent. We've stayed below that mark, which is that's where the state has determined the cap is there. So we receive about 17 million for our 1,900 K-21 students. We get additional basic ed funding at 4.9. And we've got 34% of our Yakima School District state funding is spent on our students receiving special education services. Safety net for state funding for the 2021 school year was $222,000. When we look at our local funding, so this would be our levy for all of our special ed overages, those come out of our local funds. For the 2021 school year, Yakima School District, 6 million short in our special ed expenses. The next slide is our pre-K finances for state and federal combined. For the 2021 school year, we were at 3.7 for our early learning program. When we look at our graduation and attendance rates, the average graduation rates for students with disabilities for the last 3 school years averaged 63%. And attendance for Yakima School District students with disabilities has increased 11% over that same 3-year period. So our next steps. Our special education services department continues to provide that professional development and support for our building staff to help them recognize that some students with disabilities are going to need additional social skills, instruction, or training in order to be successful in the general ed program. There'll continue to be training on using inclusionary practice to allow students with disabilities those increased opportunities and access to general ed courses and peers. And special ed services will continue to work to increase the graduation rate for children with disabilities by providing a variety of instructional service models. That concludes the formal presentation. I don't know if the board had questions for us, and we're here to take those questions.
Any questions from board members?
I have a couple of questions. Thank you, Joni, for your presentation. It's very informative. I like how you outlined all the slides. It was easy to understand as we went through all of the slides. So a couple of questions. You talked about, I think it was on one of the slides around the finances component of special ed and Medicaid reimbursement. Does that, I'm just curious about the reporting requirements, and are there any compliance or audit pieces that come along with the Medicaid reimbursement? And if so, what are the results of those audits?
So I know that we've had on-site audits for those. The financial audits, I believe, Becky, does that come through your department?
Yes, it would. We haven't had any review of the Medicaid reimbursement.
And so does, in terms of the on-site audit, Joni, is that like a regular, is that once a year or every few years, or what does that look like?
You know, since I've been here, and this is my 6th year, I think, 7th year. Since I've been here, we've only had one on-site, and they just, they didn't do. I don't recall them doing, reviewing records for Medicaid, et cetera, looking at charting notes or anything like that. But we do have them on site, if they were ever on site to review that. But most of our submissions go to the, are submitted electronically. And then, any exceptions or anything, we review those, go back through to see if we're able to resubmit for those claims.
Okay. And on one of the later slides, I saw that looks like the graduation has gone down the last few years. Can you just offer your insights and thoughts as to why you think what the main reasons are for that decline?
Yeah. So one of the things that we noticed through COVID, the graduation rates that are reported there are students that are reported that graduate within 5 years. So many of our students are self-contained, and they're able to stay with us through age 21. And we did have several families through COVID whose children were not 21 years of age yet, but chose to go ahead and either stop attending with an opportunity perhaps to come back as numbers went down for COVID, or chose, they didn't age out, they would graduate at that point. And so so the numbers are off during COVID, and we recognize that. We have been in contact with those students that were eligible to remain with us, and following up with them to see, what the family would like to do at this point. So, yeah.
Okay. And if I think I also saw that the funding for special ed we're short $6 million last year. I forget what the time period was. So it's always good to see what that difference is. If the board were to give you a magic wand, what are some things that you would like to do in the special ed programming that we offer?
Yeah. You know, I'm glad that you asked that. That's something that directors talk about on a regular basis. Really, the work, so much of the work can be done at the preschool level. We have students coming up that we see that, you know, if we were able to address the behavioral support or communication supports at an earlier age, that that they would be more ready for kindergarten programs, and then maybe transition into our general ed classrooms at an earlier age. So really that pre-K, K1 is really where the focus is moving forward. And we would request additional behavior support through with considering additional positions in the district that would be new to our district, but would help support students that are struggling.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Well, thank you so much for you and all you do, and to your team and all they do. I've shared this in other meetings before, but I received pretty intensive special ed services from 3rd grade to 8th grade around speech pathology, speech services. And so, you know, it was such an important part of my education to be able to receive those services. And I was glad that they were there and they were available when I was growing up. And I can speak fluently because of that support that I was able to get. So thank you so much for all of the work that you do and all the support that you and your team provide to our students.
Thank you, Graciela. Any other questions from the board or comments? I don't see anyone coming forward. So Joni, if as we reflect on your presentation, if anyone has questions or comments that they'd like to share with you, they can contact you or Dr. Darling, correct?
Always, yes. Thank you. And we appreciate that, your interest in and also your support. So questions, or if you meet people in the community that have questions, we're here to answer questions for families too that are looking for resources. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Joni, to you and your staff for sharing your time with us this afternoon. Special ed is pretty important to the board and to the families that use those services, and we appreciate everything that you do for those students. Okay, next item on the agenda are items of board interest. First being any reports from members of the board. Do we have any members of the board who wish to share anything with other board members? Okay, I don't see anyone coming forward. The next is the superintendent update. Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, President Rice. Before I get started, I'd just like to acknowledge Pablo, who's here from Hoover. Thank you for staying with us. You have now been the longest attendee of students who aren't part of our Superintendent Student Advisory Council. So I hope that you will connect with me later later on down the road. I would love to have you be a regular part of advising the board and sharing your perspective. And I say that, Pablo, because at any point, if you need to leave tonight, you just go ahead and you can go ahead and sign off, because it's a long meeting and it'll go on like this for a while longer. So thank you, Pablo. And if you need to sign off, please do. Okay. So with that, I just will call out first and foremost, I want to thank Joni for her presentation. Also, I wanted to thank as well Cheryl Jordan for being here and introducing Pablo earlier. Our February character word, as you can see, is up right now. It is patience. Patience is the capacity, habit, or fact of being patient. In Spanish, inquisitivo, dado a indagar o investigar, inclinado a hacer preguntas. The trait is effective communicator, falls under. And the característica in Spanish is comunicador efectivo. So we're excited about that for the having a lot of patience this month, in the month of February, with everything that's happening. And we commend, obviously, our board for being patient in what we have gone through over the last year plus in facing the pandemic in our community as well. With that, we're going to go ahead and have a report from Stacy. And I believe that Jewel Brumley is out today. So I think Stacy will most likely be taking both of the presentations moving forward. And this will also be a time for the board to ask any questions about possibly coming back in person. So we would love to entertain that and answer all of those questions, given that Stacy is our expert in that at the moment. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to our Assistant Superintendent of Operations, Ms. Stacy Lott.
Thank you, Trevor. I appreciate that. Good afternoon, Board of Directors. And we'll start with the Yakima School District COVID dashboard here for the 24th through the 6th, and let you get a look at where we're at. You can still see that students by quarantine are in the double digits, as well as staff and students with confirmed cases. Barb, if you could please. So when we look at the bottom, for the last 2 weeks, we are at 8.7% of our students quarantined, or about 1,340 of them. Again, we've got about 556 positives and 141 staff positives. So next slide, Barb. And this data here is for the last couple weeks. And so over a 14-day period, we've had 26.18% positivity. However, this last week, just the week in and of itself, we averaged 19.89. And so you can see it is going down by week, but those 2 weeks together are better than the last 14 days. But last week itself at under 19% was very good. Next slide, we are continue to offer vaccine clinics. We have 3 scheduled at YV Tech from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. We have 1 scheduled at Barnes-Lincoln on the 15th, and we have 1 scheduled at Washington Middle School on the 16th. Additionally, we have pending dates for Adams Elementary, Davis High School, and Ridgeview Elementary. So we're keeping up with the testing on site, and we are continuing to provide vaccine clinics throughout the community. And then as we move forward with Jewel's presentation, as you can see, there's a daily drop. We don't have the updated cases as of yet today, but there was a daily drop right before the beginning of the weekend here. We also see that we've reached the top of the surge there at 45, and we've dropped to 36.24. I would caution though that last year at this time we were below the 1,000 mark, so still definitely elevated and high risk in our community. 7-day rate again is cut in half as we see a steep decline, which is what happened throughout the country. Once they reached the peak, the decline is rather dramatic. And again, we are in the first of the month here, but the majority of the people that are in positive status are unvaccinated. And as we might imagine, our zip code numbers for the 1st of February were much higher than we'd seen across the board, with 98942 being Selah, I believe, if I remember right, yeah. And then our hospitalizations rate, they met almost that 80 number of 80 people quarantined in the hospital, but we can see that is kind of popped up and down, but is declining at this point in time. And then again, by vaccination status, interestingly enough, the first week here, it's kind of a tie, 6 and 7 for vaccinated versus unvaccinated for hospitalization for February. And then for deaths for February, the same, 2 and 2 for unvaccinated versus vaccinated, for a total of 4 at this point. But again, if you look down the bottom, you can see that unvaccinated has doubled vaccinated persons when it comes to death. Hospitalizations by age for this month tends to be more towards the 49 to 79 age group. And then school age cases, 614 for the month of February, and then 119 new staff. And then again, what we might anticipate at 27% of school age children being part of the positive group. And then initiating vaccine, slowly moving up. 63.5% of our population has now initiated the vaccine as of February 2nd. Percent of youth initiating the vaccine 5 and up is up a little bit at 68.8%. Fully vaccinated by population as of February 2nd, we're at 56.2%. Fully vaccinated 5 and up, we are at almost 61%. And then Jules' weekly forecast, you can see it's pretty much in line with what's going on. We've hit the peak here, the first of the month, and hopefully with the new update in the weekly cases, we are trending down as sharp as her forecast. Any questions I could answer about those 2 items?
Any questions from board members?
Okay, Barb, could we move on to, Trevor, would you like me to move on to the virtual versus in-person guidance?
Absolutely. I think that the last session that we had, I know that Director Beckett had some questions, and Director Rice was a little unclear on what the changes may have been moving forward. So we wanted to certainly remove any of that doubt and respond to any of their questions. So if you could take us through that, that would be wonderful.
So I contacted legal over at WAS to determine if there was any updated guidance since August 26, 2021. And she shared with me that no, that this is the newest document that is governing the Open Public Meeting Act. And it says that we may do so without restriction on capacity or without physical distancing requirements. However, face coverings are required in any indoor space. And Proclamation 2025.15, I also put in board docs, and it will address the requirements of the school board if indeed we do have in-person meetings in relation to requiring any individual that enters that facility to wear a mask. If we scroll down a little bit, it talks about what to do if a person does refuse. A little bit down, Barb, a little bit the other direction, Barb. Sorry about that, right there. Thank you. So it talks about what the responsibilities are if somebody refuses to wear a face mask. And again, we are required to ensure that everybody is wearing one. And if they do refuse, there are 3 bullets there surrounding what we can do as far as clearing the room, closing the session, related to in-person meetings. If you scroll down, other things to consider here at the board meetings, but if you scroll down to towards the bottom, like the last 3 bullets, a little bit further down, Barb, a little bit more, right there, please. So it does talk about failing to enforce face covering requirements opens the school district to liability for the spread of any communicable disease. Possible lawsuits could allege board members were deliberately indifferent to following emergency proclamations and aligning with state guidelines. Insurance coverage for communicable diseases is currently unavailable, and school board members are individually named in lawsuits, and their personal finances may be sought as a remedy. And this guidance and direction is still currently in place. Obviously, we know that things can change very rapidly. Last week, Superintendent Kevin Chase of the ESD did informally ask at the superintendent's meeting how many districts were still in virtual versus in person. And based on the response, although he didn't take a roll call, just on response alone, it appeared that about 80% of our districts are still in virtual learning, or not, excuse me, virtual learning, virtual meetings. I can also let you know that our health district is also still meeting virtually. So that's kind of the latest surrounding that. The DOH does not weigh in on open public meetings in regard to whether or not we should or shouldn't have them. If you look towards the bottom of this document, it connects to, let's see, Barb, it's almost at the very bottom of it. The other document that you just popped up. Yeah, the very bottom of this. This is the area that was referenced. A little further down, please. Or up, I guess that's up. It's not down. Up, 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 up. It might be on page, let me see here. I wrote it down here. Page 3, I think. A little bit, up a little bit more. Right there, there. Is it there? Hereby moves relate to plans. No, it's up a little bit further. Sure, I can't even find it now. It's on there where basically what it says, it is the government, or in this case, our board of directors' responsibilities as a requirement to, dang it, where is it? As a requirement to enforce the rule of mask wearing. Let's see. It was on page 3, maybe a little further down, Barb. Of course, I just found it today. You think I could find it now? Yep. No, I know it's further up towards the beginning of the document. But anyhow, basically it says that you have to enforce wearing the masks.
Do you have anything else on this topic, Stacy?
You know, I do not. That is all the information I could find related to school board meetings and open public meetings.
Okay. Any questions from board members?
This is just a question for Stacy or Trevor. Are we getting any significant pushback from community members asking us to go back to in-person board meetings, or is the community kind of split 50-50 or indifferent, or what's the response in the community about having virtual meetings right now?
Thank you, Director Walker. I have not had anybody request an in-person meeting or ask about why we are not, or asking us to go back at this point. I'm looking at Barb Fiskus right now. I don't know if she's received, and she says no, she hasn't either. So there has not been a significant push. I can see, right now we have 12 people watching this session. Typically in the past, our board meetings have been around the same as far as attendance in person. So there has not been, though. So thank you for that question.
Any other questions?
Hello, Amy.
Madam President, I am not raising my hand.
Okay.
My question for Stacy and maybe for Trevor is, last year when the board was meeting in person at the Eisenhower Theater, these same masking requirements were in place, were they not, by proclamation?
Yes.
Was there any problem with that, with masking with our board members and staff people who were meeting in person, or people in the audience?
So I'll go ahead and answer that. We did have one or two individuals that did push back on wearing masks. I had to speak with them several times, and ultimately around the third time they did comply. One of the things that was not shared by Stacy, and I think she can correct me if I'm wrong, but in a meeting that we were at last week, the information was shared that the police will not address a masking issue in our meetings. So anything that needs to be handled does have to be handled internally with our staff, but the law enforcement is not going to engage in that process. So at that point we did. We were told at that point that if we were spoke with the individual 3 times, on the 4th time, then the police would be able to intervene on a no trespass, but that is no longer the case from what we're hearing now. So the answer at that point was, yes, we did have a couple of issues. It was also around the point, so I want to be very transparent in this, that was also at a time where we had several people that were running for school board positions, and it had to do with people that were typically running for those positions.
So the guidance from this governor's proclamation hasn't changed from when the board was meeting in person. I mean, it still says everyone's masked up. That's a state law. It is what it is, right?
Correct.
We have no control over that.
No, we do not have any control over that. And I think what I would just like to share with you is that the enforcement of that then falls upon us within our district. So we do have to make a choice on how that's going to be handled if we are back in person and people refuse. And I know that Stacy had some options that were listed in bullet points.
Well, I think everybody that's functioning in society understands, with public meetings, the mask mandate is a state rule, and it's not something local municipalities have any control over. What we do have control over is whether or not we meet in person and allow people the opportunity to show up and either give their feedback, be it positive or negative. I guess I feel like every time we discuss the issue about whether or not we should be meeting in person, we're met with a lot of detail about other things that are sort of, circuitous issues that may or may not be very, very relevant, but they don't ever actually get back to the point of whether or not we should be meeting in person. And personally, I think we should be meeting in person. I don't know if any of my fellow current board members ever tried to log on to a meeting. We all, of course, get the calendar link where it's very easy because it's simple to click and log on. But I would encourage the other 4 board members to maybe ask a friend or a family member who doesn't live in their home and doesn't have access to their computer to try to just figure out how to log on to a school board meeting. If whether or not you wanted to give testimony or not, I think people on our board would be surprised to know that it's not nearly as simple as clicking one button and just boom, being there to whether watch it or provide feedback. I would be very curious to hear if people could respond to that. And then, of course, I just think the reality is we live in a very low-tech community. The idea that there is a monthly board meeting on a Tuesday night and people know how to find it, whether it's a grandma who's raising her kids or a PTA parent who wants to give feedback, that's part of our democracy. And I really believe that we need to to cherish that, protect it, provide for it. And the fact that we're sitting back and not doing that while we're expecting our teachers and staff to meet with kids face to face, to me feels very hypocritical. So I encourage us to keep looking into it. I think we should do it. If other board members don't agree, that's their prerogative. But I'm just scratching my head wondering why we aren't doing it at this point. So thank you, Martha.
Thank you, Ryan. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, I do have a couple questions. So what I understand from that review of the policy, the state mandates or whatever guidance, that everybody in our school district, I mean, the mask wearing applies to everybody that's in the school district, right? Is that what I'm getting? So one is, are we getting resistance from teachers, parents, staff about wearing masks? And if so, what are we doing? What's the process there? How do we get a parent off the campus that's refusing to wear a mask? And so those are kind of questions I would have. And as I said in the past, to expect our teachers, our administrators, our staff, all our staff to have to go to school, go in the buildings, interact with kids in our community during this pandemic, and the board continues to be meeting remotely. I don't see that. I see a disconnect there in terms of our role as leaders in our community and setting an example and being those leaders, being those servant leaders that we say we are. So I don't know if anybody can answer my two questions that I just asked.
So Director Navarro, I think one of your questions, not that I remember all of them. So
okay,
but,
sure.
I know one of them was about what are we doing with parents, and during the height of the Omicron and we were seeing kind of an elevated infection rate, what we've done is we have required or disallowed visitors to the school and kind of operations outside of the internal operations. So that has restricted people from coming into the building during this time of heightened awareness. So there was a time we started with that. We went back to normal operations, and then they started to increase again, and we reinstituted no outside visitors during that time. So it has ebbed and flowed according to what we've seen. And then I'd just like to throw in one other thing to state as far as what Director Beckett, when you referred to kind of the information that you're met with, that you get a lot of information that is maybe not as helpful as it could be. That is certainly not the intent of that I have or of staff. Our intent is to provide you with all of the information. This is actually a board decision. So this is not a decision of the superintendent or of the cabinet. So if there's anything more that we could provide, we would be more than happy to do so. And I certainly understand that this is a challenging decision to make. And I think it's important to take a look at, what is happening regionally and for us to get you clear information. So if we're lacking in that area, please let me know and I'll be in touch to see what we can do to better provide clear information for that decision to be made. And
So my first,
you had another question?
yeah, my first question was, is not wearing a mask an issue for people in our community, teachers? Is that an issue that we're currently dealing with in the school district? Or are people complying with that guidance?
People are complying with that guidance in
Okay.
the schools. So yeah, that is happening internally. We have a population that truly understands and has a desire to stay in session. And as the board is well aware, we were able to switch to remote for the entire district 1 week, and then we alternated with 8 schools and then 4 schools. So our staff is very aware of the importance of following those guidelines so that we can stay in session. And at this point, I should also just commend our teachers, our certified and classified, for adhering to those rules and regulations and doing all that they can to keep us in session.
So I would be in support of going to in-person meetings as well. I believe we can come up with a policy or procedure. So when somebody does refuse to wear a mask, then we follow certain steps. It could be disruptive. I understand that, but we've had other individuals with other issues that were disruptive of our meetings as well. So I just believe that we can have something in place, and if somebody refuses to wear a mask, then whatever that process is, then we let them know. And if we have to, then we can recess that meeting or move to a different location, or there's a lot of options that we can utilize in order to deal with whatever issues. I just don't want to say, let's not meet in person because of a potential, or maybe somebody might not wear a mask, and that's going to hold the board liable and us individually liable financially, whatever. So I don't like to live like that or plan that way of let's not do something because something else might happen. Let's do something, and if something happens, then we can deal with it and have a contingency plan. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Trevor?
Thank you, President Rice. I also know that the board had requested information about locations. I don't know if you want us to share that at this time, President Rice?
Sure, go ahead.
So we did look into several locations. Ideally, we would have loved to have kept it at either the auditorium at Eisenhower, or because we do not have an auditorium that's accessible at this point with the construction project at Davis, we looked at the Commons. Both of those are unavailable. What that does allow, though, is we would have the open area, the cafeteria area at Eisenhower would work. The challenge there for our earlier meetings would be that we would still have kids milling around and walking around, which the board would just have to be aware of. The locations that would seem to be the best place if the board wanted to meet in a larger venue would be either YV Tech. We have 2 of the 3 rooms that we would be able to remove the curtain in between, and I believe that gives us about 180 capacity. And then the other option is the PDC, the Professional Development Center, which is right across from Davis, the old Coca-Cola building, for those who know the historical monuments here in Yakima. That would actually hold, I believe, 90. I'm looking at Barb for confirmation on that. She has the actual numbers. So we would recommend that either if we do switch to an in-person and you're looking for maximum occupancy, that we look at the PDC first, YV Tech second because of the questionable audio system that they have there. And then after that, the options are extremely limited because of after school events, drama, preparations that are going on, and then of course lacking the auditorium at Davis. So the only other real school option would be the Eisenhower cafeteria area.
Thank you, Trevor. The board might remember last summer when we were meeting in person for our business meetings, we found out that the custodial staff had to come in and fog the room, I guess that's how they do it, to make sure that it was sanitized prior to the meeting. And then they had to come in and do the same thing all over again for the for after the meeting. And at that time, the numbers were starting to trend up. And I believe that the numbers were, at that time, the numbers were similar to what they are now. And the board determined that rather than continue for in-person board meetings, we made the decision to go back to virtual meetings for the business meetings, because we were concerned about the impact on our custodial staff, and as well as the impact on the building staff, where the building staff might not be able to have confidence that their spaces, their public spaces, their classrooms were getting the attention that they needed to get to make sure that our staff and our students were safe. And so at that time, the board determined that we would go back to virtual meetings just to ensure that the staff and students were safe and that they weren't doing this tremendous amount of work to sanitize a room both before the meeting and after the meeting. I don't know that the numbers that we're seeing, particularly for staff and students, what those numbers are telling us. But I'm of the impression that we still have high numbers of infections within our buildings. And I'm a little concerned that we have, maybe we have custodial staff that are being affected by the infections. And maybe we have students who are in our places where we've got, where we do have access to the facilities, that those staff and students could be affected by the impact that would be placed upon the custodial staff for those facilities. I don't want the board to be in a position where staff, students, or even our custodial staff are impacted by our decisions to go in person. I believe that there are sufficient access points for our meetings. And Director Beckett, if you have other suggestions for how we might make, how we might improve those access points, I'd certainly be open to having those discussions. But at this point, I think the numbers are still too high for us to make that decision. Now, the numbers may go down in a month or so, and if that's the case, we can certainly revisit this.
Martha, I would be interested in knowing, or maybe Trevor has the answer, that are we still utilizing or following the same cleaning guidelines or disinfecting guidelines we did a year ago? Because I know we were fumigating, I don't know the term, but we're using these sprayers, right, and disinfecting classrooms. And so are we following that same procedure for sterilizing or disinfecting buildings? Like after I go to Davis basketball games, are staff going in there and disinfecting the entire gym every time there's a basketball game or classrooms? And so I'm just wondering if we're still following those same procedures. That's one question.
Excellent question. Anthony, are you available to respond?
Yes, I am. I am unaware if that is what is taking place, but I can get an answer for you within minutes.
Thank you, Anthony.
And then just in the numbers, I heard Stacy say that we've we hit the apex or the peak of the current variant. And so what just, you know, what's interesting is that the variants, right? The Delta variant we know was a lot more serious. I don't know, it affected people in a different way, more, you know, and so we're finding that the Omicron is not as serious as, can do as serious damage as the Delta. So, and I know it's infecting, or people who have the vaccines are getting infected as well. But so I'm just kind of wondering about that, if the variant, because we have a different variant, which is not as serious as Delta, if that makes a difference. To me, it would make a difference. I mean, I go out to our community just about every day, and you see, I went to Costco the other day. It was packed there. I went to church on Sunday, and I couldn't even get a seat there because there was so many people there. So I don't know if people will have any difficulty coming to a meeting and believing that they're going to be infected with the current variant. So I just think that comparing this year to last year, it has some value, but there are different variants, and so we're reacting differently to it, I think. So I don't know if Anthony has an answer for us.
Anthony, go ahead.
I just got off the phone with the supervisor, and what he is telling me is it is not specifically after each event, it is at the end of every day. So at the end of every day, the buildings are still being electrostatically sprayed, which is what you're referring to as fogging. And that includes the high school and the middle school gyms.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from board members?
I would have a question. You know, we had a 7-hour retreat with us and I don't know how many different staff people in the Central Services boardroom last month. Was that room treated and or of some sort, you know, before or after? And given the fact that there are no rules, as I understand it, in the governor's proclamation about capacity, you know, outside of fire capacity, I don't see any reason why we can't just use the Central Services boardroom. It's you know, it's got the technology requirement and everything is set up right there to where it's in a familiar place where everyone knows where it is. Unless I'm missing something, there's nothing that says we couldn't do that.
To answer your question, yes, in Central Services, we also electrostatically spray the conference room A and B, as well as every room that is occupied by more than one individual. So it has a scent of rosemary or thyme. A lot of times in the evening, you'll notice it, or early in the morning before the building starts to get occupied, you'll smell an herb in the air, and that's what it's from.
I guess last but not least, the thing I would say is that, you know, we've got, you know, millions upon millions of dollars from, you know, federal taxpayers to assist us with the reopening of our schools post-COVID. And so the idea that there would be, you know, an issue or a problem with custodial staff, to me, doesn't really hold water. So I would certainly hope we could utilize some of that to make sure that our board is still as accessible to the public as it should be.
And I just want to make my last statement as well. So as a board member and a leader of our community, I don't feel comfortable saying because of the current pandemic, the situation, the stats, the numbers, that we're not going to meet in person because we might be infected or other people might be infected. Yet we change our tune or the standards in terms of our teachers, our administrators, our staff, and we're saying, you know what, the numbers are high, everything we talked about, but you know what, you still got to go into work because we still got to teach it. You know, we got to provide an education to our students. So to me, that's I think that Brian hit it as a hypocrisy. How can we follow one certain standard make decisions for the board that benefits the board, but yet make another decision or support another decision, or a decision where our staff teachers have to go in and interact or face or be, you know, in harm's way, I guess, as so to speak, of the variant or the virus. So I just see that as, I'm not comfortable with that as a board member and a leader. So thank you.
Stacy.
If I could, I'd just like to clarify that in a school setting, as well as in any school district building, all staff are required to be 6 feet apart and masked at all times. And children are required to be 3 feet apart from each other, which again is in contradiction to what the Open Public Meeting Act says, where everybody can come and everybody can, there's no distancing requirements. But every day in our schools and at our central office, adults 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart in meetings, 6 feet apart in hallways as much as possible, and students 3 feet apart. So those guidelines are still in place. So just to clarify, when it comes to what we're saying at the central office with everybody being in there and not having spacing, that building has that spacing during the regular workday.
Thank you, Stacy. Any other comments or questions from board members?
I have a couple of questions, Martha. I agree with Ryan's concern around accessibility of the meetings. And, you know, I'll have to admit, I haven't tried to access the meetings on the public link. So I'm curious, I'm not sure if maybe this question is for Barb. Have you had many committee members reach out to you with challenges logging into the meeting, or maybe our technology department maybe received any complaints or questions about concerns around accessing that link?
Tonight we had one, and we just suggested to her to reboot her computer, but she did she mentioned that she's having computer problems before that. But other than that, we've not had anybody complain about getting on. I think we have 11 right now.
And then, you know, I think Raymond made the comment about, you know, not being too caught up in what if scenarios, and I agree with that. But I think it's important to be prepared for what if scenarios. And so looking at the guidance that, I'm not sure if it was, I think it was maybe the WASDA guidance, the Open Public Meetings Act, kind of talks about what needs to happen if somebody does refuse to wear a mask. So just thinking through logistically, and maybe this is something that we work on if we decide to move back in person, but logistically, you know, if it's after the third time that someone refuses to wear a mask or whatever that was outlined, whatever was outlined in this guidance, it says we'd have to recess and re-adjourn. And so from, I guess, the Open Public Meetings Act and then our responsibilities to get certain things done as a board, would we just have to schedule another public meeting and give the appropriate notice? Is logistically, is that what would happen? We give someone 3 or 4 warnings or requests, and if they're still not compliant, I'm just thinking through logistically what that actually looks like. Is that, I'm not sure if my question is making sense. Would we adjourn and then just schedule another meeting to follow up with that, to complete the actions that were required as part of the meeting that was originally scheduled? Does that question make sense? I'm not sure who this question is for.
Graciela, my understanding is that if we have someone who refuses to put on a mask, we can adjourn the meeting to a virtual meeting after a certain period of time. I think it's like 30 minutes or something, to allow us time to get home. And then provide folks with the opportunity to log in, provide them with the information on how to log in to the virtual meeting. That's my understanding of the process.
Okay. Okay. So I guess my general comments is I'm not don't necessarily see a need at this time to go back in person. I think, you know, aside from, you know, some potential challenges and the community finding the link in order to log in, I've actually thought that our attendance at these meetings, particularly our Monday meetings, are much higher than we've ever seen in the past. I think we have 12 plus 27 right now. That's, is that 39, 40? I should do this math better. 29 or 39 people. That's a quite high attendance, and so I think maybe I've had the sense, and I haven't went back to count the number of people attending our meetings before we went virtual, but I don't know that we've ever had 40 people at a Monday meeting or Friday morning meeting before we switched to Monday afternoon meetings before. Maybe if it was like a contract negotiation, you know, period, but I think our attendance in general is higher, and so to me that says that our meetings are more accessible to the community. I think certainly from the staff that has been in attendance on a regular basis, I think more staff are attending because it's easier and more accessible for folks. And I know that in the past when we had students participate in our meetings for the Pledge of Allegiance, you know, sometimes folks have been late or didn't show up because it can be a challenge. And so it seems like since we've been virtual, that really hasn't been an issue at all. So I think from my perspective, our meetings are much more accessible because they're online. People don't have to travel. They don't have to take time away from work to attend and show up. You know, and outside of COVID being a factor, I think in this, you know, day and age, I think it's important that virtual meetings, I think, are here to stay. In general, in the business world and the school world, I think it's just kind of a normal way of doing business now. And so to go back to you know, we must meet in person every single time, it just seems a little kind of an antiquated meeting model, to be honest. I think we have technology now that's better and easier and more accessible to many people in our communities. It's also much more efficient. From my personal perspective, as somebody who works full time, you know, I don't have to spend 30, 40 minutes driving to and from meetings. It's incredibly efficient and something that I think is helpful. And as we think about the board meetings in general and in the future, I think it opens up meetings to folks who may be interested in being on the board, who maybe can't take time out of work or to travel, or maybe there's childcare issues. If it's virtual, a lot of those issues are resolved. So I think it makes us a more inclusive and accessible board by being in a virtual format. And I think that evidenced again by our attendance today, I don't recall ever having 40 people out of any non-business meeting in the time that I've been on the board. So I don't see a need to go back in person. I don't think we are any less effective as a board. In fact, I think we're a little bit more effective as a board. We're on time, and we still get all of our duties done in an efficient manner. So I'm happy to continue to have the discussion once a month, or whatever frequency we need that to be in. But I don't see a need right now to go back to in person. And I guess my last comment is I really don't see what the value add is by going back to in person. Even COVID aside, we are as effective in our board meetings. We do lose the personal piece with each other and being able to interact with each other in person. I think that is absolutely missing. But other than that, in terms of our responsibilities as board members, there's nothing lacking in our duties, from my perspective, by meeting in a virtual environment.
Thank you, Graciela. Norm, do you have any comments or questions?
I can identify with arguments on both sides of the issue. In fact, as we recall, when we went back to in-person meetings, I think I made almost the same statement that Raymond made about it felt hypocritical to me to expect our teachers and students and all to be in person, and we were not. However, sometimes things have changed my view. I would be much more comfortable going back to in person when I see infection rates come down, when I see death rates come down, and when I see vaccination rates in this community go up. We've been in this for 2 years now, and our community vaccination rate is still only at 60%. That's not acceptable to me. That puts everybody at risk. And so as a person who has lost a dear friend to COVID, who has another dear close friend battling stage 4 cancer and is highly immunocompromised, and myself being slightly immunocompromised with having asthma. So I'm just not sure that with all this floating around infection going around, that, and the fact that nobody is concerned about the fact that we're meeting virtually right now, that we're not getting any feedback, I tend to right now I kind of lean toward let's just stay virtual. And for some of the reasons that Graciela articulated, I won't re-articulate all those reasons. But yeah, I do see merits on both sides, but I don't see a huge need to change right now until we have a healthier community.
Thank you. What I'm hearing is the majority of the board wishing to continue to have our meetings be virtual. At some point when the data that Norm outlined is down to where it was last spring, and we're certainly not there. I would be open to scheduling another discussion.
Do we have metrics for what that kind of number range looks like? Is there an acceptable metric, whether it's infections or vaccination rates or something, for the majority of the board to be interested in entertaining this?
Stacy, do we have metrics?
Well, we did before the Omicron took off like it did. We were opening back up we worked with the health department to determine when it would be safe to have visitors and volunteers back in the classrooms working with staff. And it was going to be 500 per 100,000 over a 14-day period. And we haven't, since the numbers are in the 3,000 now, we haven't talked to them about what reopening would look like and what they would be agreeable to. But the number was 500 per 100,000 over a 14-day period.
Thank you, Stacy. Any other comments or questions from board members?
Does this affect whether or not our board will meet in person for the retreat that is scheduled in May? I'm sorry, in March, pardon me.
When we meet in the conference room with just the board and the superintendent's cabinet, we are able to maintain the 6-foot social distancing that we require for school staff. So I don't know if that answers your question, Ryan. Kind of a maybe yes, maybe no.
No, but I'll reformulate the question for another time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from board members? Okay, based on our discussion, it sounds like we will continue in virtual settings until such time as the numbers come down a little bit more. And then we can revisit this and have a discussion as to whether or not it's our decision point will include business meetings only, or business meetings and our Monday work sessions. So I don't see.
Martha, what do you mean by a little bit more? Is that a 50% reduction, 30, 10%? That we have to have, like as Ryan mentioned, a metrics to figure out that point where we take action, where we say, okay, let's meet, let's discuss. Because if we just leave it a little bit more, then there's no point there. We can just say it's not enough a little bit more, or it's too little a little bit more. You know, I guess you get my point. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I understand your point, Raymond. Given the numbers that we saw today of, I don't know what it was, 3,000 for a 14-day period, the numbers are dropping, but to my way of thinking, 3,000 for a 14-day period doesn't meet my criteria for considering another discussion. But if the numbers start dropping enough to get to the point where we were last spring, we can certainly revisit this.
just because the variants are different, that we're never going to hit those numbers, because as we know, Omicron is going to spread. It's spreading faster, so we're really comparing apples and oranges. I think that wouldn't be a good comparison. So I don't know. There has to be agreed upon, I think, a number, a reduction. What is that reduction before we can start to that holds our board accountable. It gives us a target. It tells us, it gives us, I guess, a point where we can start to have these discussions again. Because if it's just open, then we may never have another discussion. And then my final thing is, this is just our new normal. We're going to have Omicron, and there's the AD2 now, and then after that, there's going to be another variant, and I think it's just going to keep going. So we can't hide forever. We can't. Cleansing and fogging and all that disinfectant are going to be part of the process. I believe I'm going to carry a mask or 2 or 3 masks with me, face masks and hand sanitizer with me for who knows, for the foreseeable future. So it's just going to be part of our everyday normal lives. So I think we can't be afraid of that, and we just have to move forward and do what we do as a board. And so that's my last comment. Thanks.
Or we could just set a date where we bring up this discussion again, like maybe our first meeting in March, which is, given that February is the shortest month of the year, it's just going to be a few weeks.
That would make sense to me, Martha. Maybe the first month meeting of each month, we have a discussion and look at the data and make a decision.
Okay.
I think we have 2 questions here before us. The first is whether or not we want to meet in person, because given what Director Villanueva referenced as far as meeting online versus meeting in person in general, I think we need to decide if the board is just simply not interested in meeting in person, then we can stop wasting everyone's time with the discussion. If that isn't the case, and then we should be reviewing numbers every single week and talking about what the acceptable metrics are. There are, I mean, I have a list that I sent to you, Martha, of other school boards that are meeting in person. So we're not the only people trying to create a wheel here. We just have to decide whether or not we really want to do it or not.
Well, I looked at that list, Ryan, and from my conversations with folks both in the area and around the state, there are a lot of school boards that are still meeting in person. I don't have a list, but I could probably dig down and create one. And I think whether the others have chosen to move to in-person, it may be temporary on their part. It could be more permanent on their part. I just think that it would make more sense for us to just kind of set a date to have another discussion. I'm not sure that another discussion like this every week is something that we want to entertain, nor do I think that making a decision that is going to affect how, whether the board is meeting in person this week, but not next week, and maybe not the week after, but the week after that, we're meeting in person. I don't want to have people have to search as to whether or not the board is meeting in person. I'd like to get us to the point where we're fairly certain that things are taking a downward trajectory, and then make that decision a more permanent one. Any other questions or comments from board members? Okay, seeing none, thank you all for the conversation. I know this is a difficult decision for board members to make, but we want to make sure that we are as safe in our interactions with the community as we can be. So thank you for that discussion today. We'll revisit this at the first meeting in March. Barb, could you make sure that we add that to the agenda for the first March meeting? I think it's the 7th.
Yes, I will.
And then we may have a better handle on what the data is telling us. Okay. All right. Next item on the agenda is a discussion on the school calendar. Trevor, do you have, this is an information only discussion?
Yes, would you like me to lead in?
Yes, please.
Okay, wonderful. So this evening we have two of our student reps, and I believe some more may be joining them as our primary presenters on information around modified calendar. There was some work that was done earlier this year by this student group, the Superintendent Student Advisory Council. However, you also know that there was a more in-depth thought exchange that reached out to students, community, parents, and others. But having this presentation is something that we wanted to be able to share with you. And then also we have 3 of our district representatives from the calendar committee that participated on behalf of the district. As you remember, there are 3 YEA members and 3 members from the district that come together to present. And we're happy to have Bill Hilton, Maria Lucero, IC, and then Eric Diner are here as well for responses to any questions that the board may have. So we'll lead off with our student presentation with Connor Lincoln and I think is Valeria. Do I see her anywhere? She's here?
Yes,
Okay.
hi.
Wonderful, Valeria Garza. And then after that, follow up with any questions that the board may have for the student representatives and then also for our 3 principals that participated in the process. So Connor, Valeria?
Well, thank you, Superintendent Green. Good afternoon. And we are the lead fellows of the Superintendent Student Advisory Council. And so with that position, Valeria and I have a great opportunity to share a variety of fellow student perspectives and our own thoughts on these topical issues on behalf of our peers and colleagues around the district.
Today, before we start, I'd like to introduce some of the students. They are reps from Eisenhower Leadership, and they're going to give their fresh student viewpoint on the calendar. We have Dakari Lewis, Luana Huang, and Sydney Hager.
Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate you giving your time to this discussion.
To quickly review the modified calendar equity rationale, studies say that 2/3 of the achievement gap in 9th grade can be attributed to the amount of required time it takes a teacher to reteach and review what was learned prior to the summer intermission.
All right. So we can start with institutional feedback. So we sourced different perspectives from organized student voices grouped in leadership cohorts from a few different schools across the district. So first, we have with our AC Davis High School, ASB, 41% of that group supports the transition to a modified calendar, a plurality, but a majority either needs more info or opposes it already. Many officers also believe that there are multiple drawbacks: youth employment, autonomy, social, cultural, and developmental opportunities that would all be significantly reduced in a modified calendar setting.
The Eisenhower High School students from the leadership feel that it would affect the summer employment. It would have many questions brought up. Mostly, the more we informed them, the more that they had concerns, questions, comments. We filled them in as much as possible. I did as the SSAC perspective for them, and they gave important feedback like questions on lowering vacation times and restricting family connection and social development, impacts on clubs and sports, low-income families, just basic questions and concerns.
Right. And so then moving on to the feedback we got from the Student Advisory Council, the Superintendent Student Advisory Council weighed in with its thoughts back in December, giving mostly positive feedback. So students saw better student experiences, higher achievement, stronger mental health, even advanced equity, and overall more beneficial outcomes. However, deeper activities like longer trips, sports, or activities would be curtailed. And there were some questions around whether learning could actually be disrupted rather instead of becoming more continuous. So we also conducted some random sampling data, convenient sampling, and more accessible survey responses.
Like, for example, first off, we conducted informal digital social media polling on Thursday and Friday of last week. The results were modest: 13 in favor of modified calendar and 16 supporting the current schedule framework. It seems like the students' leaders are more favorable to the changes, that more diversified student voice are not found in traditional leadership roles, such as it could be possible that there remains a large core of support for and comfort within the current schedule. And this schedule, because there has been a dearth of reliable information about this transition in terms of communication and critical decision to the educational community, particularly key student voices. There we go. And this is the Google Form sampling conducted by colleagues of ours, DeCarly Lewis, at the Eisenhower High School. She created this form and she began sharing it in her own initiative, demonstrating spontaneous and authentic and creative student voice capacity. So for context, it was shared on multiple social media accounts. From Instagram, they were being reshared and rebroadcasted throughout many students, not just SSAC, but just high school freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, including like YSD Voice. 3/4 of our students generally are in favor for it. And then with 45 days on 10 days off calendar model, 2/3 of responding students like it. This is way more favorable than student opinion on the shorter summer 45-15 model as shown next. For the 45-15 showed too much summer was taken away and wasn't as preferred as having a 45-10, which with students who did not want their summer to be messed with, they would rather compromise for the 45-10, and the 45-10 gained a lot of positive feedback.
Right. So then here's the data for the 45-15 model with only 30% supporting it and a supermajority opposing it. So that would encourage, again, as Valeria stated, a more modest transition to a more balanced model. And then moving on to those compiled perspectives, I'll put onto one graphic. You can see the overall support for the current calendar versus the overall lack of support for the most aggressive 45-15 model based on the sampling that we had conducted. But we also had some quantitative data in mind that we had gotten responses on from that form. So we can move on to the important points from those.
Over the next few slides that you're about to see, there are some raw responses for your review at another point later on. This file would be accessible throughout board docs. And then see some of the key points from these responses. The calendar showed that the opportunity for jobs, social skills, travel experiences, a lot of summer benefits, like according to students they sampled. However, it was also a modified calendar concept, and it would create a better mental health environment from their perspective as well.
Hi, so I'm Luna Huang, and I'm sure some of you guys might remember me from last summer when I came to put inputs onto our school calendar. So that's what I'm here doing today as well. So just to get started and to right off the bat, I want to share that I am fortunate enough to have 6 family members, 3 of which can take me places, can drive me from home to school and back and do outside school activities. However, in our district, there are students who have single mothers. There are students who have single fathers who live with their grandparents, who live with their aunts and uncles, who don't have this kind of transportation that can take them from place to place as easily as I could have it. And I'm sure that you guys have kids of your own who probably throughout this year may have needed to get someplace that you might have had someone else take them there because you couldn't make it. And how now thinking about it, it may sound like a good idea that we do change and have this modified calendar be put in place. It may be a small issue. And the reason is because of how our community is running. Each family has a schedule that they put in place every year, and they plan out what they want for vacations. They plan out how they're going to use this schedule to help transport their kids from home to school. And if we really look at it, do we really need a change this drastic right now? Is there perhaps something simpler that we can put in place? Especially because with a pandemic going on right now, with the surge of Omicron and COVID cases in this district, having a change like this is going to affect a lot of students with going from online to in person, back to online and back to in person. And this is going to change our community quite a lot. And I do also want to point out one thing, is that with this new change, I do like the idea of having this change. I do want to have a break perhaps for midterms. And I do think that having more breaks is a good idea, but in a time of pandemic, it's probably best to start off small or to dial it down before we put this modified calendar into place. And I have a quote right here that I did pull up, and it was someone who gave input on what their thoughts were. It says, only 5 to 8 weeks of summer break is ridiculous. The usual 3 months gives students the opportunity to grow, rejuvenate, and do things they enjoy doing outside of school. And I absolutely 100% agree with what this person is saying. Having our summer break that we have right now allows kids to do hobbies and have kids to try new things. And I'm sure that's what you guys want for our educational system as well. Not only should kids be able to learn, kids should be able to have their own hobbies and do what they like. And that's exactly why we need to keep this simpler before we push anything out there. And there are parents who work 9-to-5 jobs, and most parents in our community most students probably have single parents or have parents who work 9-to-5 jobs. And a change like this at this time is extremely hard on families. And especially with like losses in COVID and losing family members, there are still some people out there who are grieving, who aren't really ready for this kind of change. And I feel like pushing this out on them could hurt a lot of people. However, if you are to make change, I suggest you make the change small and make sure you hear out what students have to say, what parents have to say, and what teachers have to say. And so my final thought to you guys is, how is this going to affect your community? How would it affect those parents who have family members who are gone because of COVID? How's it going to affect students who have single parents who work 9-to-5 jobs? And how is this going to affect our community as a whole? Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Luann. Connor, do you have any other of your students that are here today?
Yes, I believe we also have another perspective to be shared by Sydney, another student from Eisenhower High School.
Sydney, whenever you're ready.
Hi, I'm Sydney Hager. So a concern of the modified calendar is childcare. The majority of the Yakima School District is the middle and elementary schools, meaning the bulk of students cannot be left in their own homes due to their age. Not every student has a sibling qualified to assist their care while the parent is not present, let alone not every student has a sibling in general. Several families cannot afford any sort of babysitter or daycare. As of course, because of this, the modified calendar would only be overall useful to the high schools. School is our guardian's balance to help them being able to work and make money for our homes and overall needs as humans. Lessening the days of the school year will completely throw off the trends in stability in households. My question to you, the board, is what is your plan to aid to the middle and elementary schools' childcare needs?
Thank you, Sydney.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. Connor, do you have any final information that you'd like to share or comments that you'd like to make?
I believe we may have one more voice joining us.
Absolutely. I'm sorry.
No worries at all.
It's totally okay. I just wanted to talk about if we were to move from the current schedule we do have, how big of an effect it would be if we did switch to the 45-15, and how it would be more beneficial if we just stuck to the current one or the 45-10. If we move to the 45-15, I feel like a lot of students wouldn't have the correct time and pace to adapt to such a quick change. I think this would affect most families and students who are busy with work and students who are busy with visiting family in different states or areas. The 45-10, it is a different change, but I feel like it's a nicer pace to go at if we are trying to get to the 45-15. It's a calmer pace just so parents can adapt to it and students can adapt like sooner to the 45-15 in the future. I don't really have anything wrong with any of these calendars. They're all amazing, but I feel like if we're involving other students who have jobs, families who don't have the time, and teachers who won't line up with their kids' schedules, if we don't all change calendars, this would affect teachers and they wouldn't have they wouldn't be able to work certain days. This would also affect families, like Sydney was saying, how students wouldn't be able to take care of their younger sibling, or parents wouldn't be able to because they wouldn't be home to do so. But that's all I really have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your input. We really appreciate hearing from our students, particularly since the student voice was not included on the calendar committee.
The takeaways that we have from all of this, to just summarize what all of them perfectly stated, was that there's plenty of support for the modified calendar, but its advocates are far less likely to be as passionate as its critics. For like summer lengths is still a major concern for the regular calendar advocates, and it seems that most students oppose any subjective changes to the calendar that fail to take into account summer jobs, opportunities, or mental health summer needs. And however, when informed that summertime loss is compensated with more breaks throughout the year, opposition of moderate declines. So in all, there's much pros and cons for both. But if there was to be a change to the calendar, and if there was to be compensation, the 45-10 would be a better takeaway than the 45-15.
And with that, we'll conclude our presentation on the subject. Thank you for including student voice in this meeting. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for spending some time with us this afternoon. We really appreciate hearing from you and hearing how students feel about the move to a modified calendar. Are there any questions from board members for either the students or the staff members who are on the calendar committee?
I do have one question. I heard that at the beginning of each academic year for a traditional calendar, there's a period of time where students are reacclimating, relearning skills and content, kind of getting up to speed. I don't know if this is for the students or for the administrators. Would that have you seen that would be the case as well if we had the different I call them quarters, right? In college we call them quarters. The 40 for each 45 days of instruction. So like in the fall, would there be a week there? Would there be another week in the winter and then the spring? Have you guys read up on that or know that, or maybe our administrators? So in essence, what I'm asking is, because there's 1 week or so, or 2 weeks, I don't know what that period is at the beginning of a traditional year, will there be more weeks if with a modified calendar?
Are you directing your question to the students, Raymond, or to the staff?
Either one of them, because I know the students made that comment that there's that transition or acclimation period, but maybe it's more for the administrators.
Well, I can try to answer. The first couple months after summer, at least 1 to 2 months, it takes us to re-engage the students and to remember and to recollect all of what we learned from the past year. 3 months being the break that we get in between school years. So it is a refresher that we need. So there's the question that, do we have to cut down the summers in order for us to recollect easier and not spend as much time trying to remember? Because with the longer the break is, the more struggle the students will have to recollect what we learned from past years. And maybe the remembering and resummarizing school, like your past school year, what we learned is necessary, but maybe it shouldn't last 2 months. It should maybe remember it for like 2 weeks, spend a couple weeks on it, and then continue with the curriculum. But I guess it just depends on how the teachers take their time on sharing, remembering this information with their students and sharing it with them.
What about when you take Christmas or the Christmas break? That's about 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks. are you finding that students are coming back and having to reacclimate again, relearn? Does
Well,
that happen with a 2-week period?
not necessarily. I feel like if anything, 2 weeks is a great amount of time for us to refresh and take a break, especially after midterms and finals when we have to take it the next year. You can take that time, not just during Christmas break, but to study and to refresh and take these 2 weeks to, because a lot of students take it and use it to their advantage, and to take this time, not just as a break, but to study for the next exam or the next semester, or if anything's coming up, because I know a lot of teachers right after the Christmas break is over, they have assignments or tests and they remind their students to study during this break because they will have something coming up, and not during the summer because it's a new grade, it's a new year. So it's not necessarily as a break, more as a study guide, a study time.
Now, what if we take that 2 weeks to 3 weeks? What are your thoughts there? How would that change? Would that change?
The dynamic
process?
would make it as too long. 3 weeks, I feel, would just make it into an extended vacation, and students would, there's like a fine line between studying and this is a break to study and turning into a full long vacation. And I feel 2 weeks is just the right amount of time. And instead take that 1 week and turn it into, like they said, the fall, have it after like midterms. So in the fall we could have a break and have the 2 weeks for Christmas, but leave the Christmas just because it's there's enough time for students to recollect everything and start studying and worrying about what happens next year.
Thank you, Valeria. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Raymond, for your question, and Valeria for your answer. I see Principal Hilton has raised his hand.
We have the 3 months at summer, and I have my own opinions on that. It's a little too long, but this is what I tell my new teachers coming in and what we kind of build here at Washington in most middle schools. The first 2 weeks of the school year is built bringing in routines, procedures, and really teaching kids how to really do school again, what it's like, how you really, how you talk in groups, how you answer questions, how those kind of things. So we do lose. Luckily, it's only about 2 weeks, but every year you take at least 2 weeks just to build in the routines again. And that's even before, you weave content in it, but there are sometimes we won't touch content for 2 weeks. It's not reteaching, it's just teaching kids basically not how to play school, but how to be successful in school. I could see that being reduced with a little more or a little lesser time in the summer. But that's where I am. And high schools may be completely different, because I know my kids get summer reading and summer work to do for the summer.
Mr. Hilton, what are your thoughts in terms of a 3-week break and that loss? Will we see the same dynamic, or would that be shorter or not exist at all, or what would be your thoughts?
Being that, remember, in middle schools, they keep kind of the same schedule, so they have the same teachers. So when you move a different grade, you would still have a little bit of transition, but we do things kind of the same per grade levels on how kids talk, how kids turn in assignments. We have some consistency, whereas in high school may be different because they're changing classes at semester, whereas we don't change as much. The least amount of time that we have in the summer, I think you would see more continuity, in my opinion. I've seen what other countries have done. I've been to Australia where they do the 9-45-10, works really well. Kids seem to do well with that as well. They score pretty well.
Thank you, Principal Hilton. I see that Principals Diner and Lucero have raised their hands. You get to fight over who goes first.
Go ahead, Maria.
To go back to the question, I believe, if I understood it correctly, about the summer versus a week, correct? That was the question. I'm going to answer it based on our current situation. So at the beginning of the year, yes, like was mentioned, there is a lot of procedures, routines that are taught. Those have to be solid. But we also, and I'm just speaking for elementary, we do that after winter break. We do that after midwinter break. We have strategic times to reteach. We have a behavior expectations fair because we know that that just needs to be revisited after those breaks. As far as learning, I mean, I was in a meeting today. We still have some first, second graders who have not mastered correct letter sounds, consonant, vowel, consonant words, and being able to decode those. And that isn't typical for this time of the year. And it's not just a classroom, it is about 50% in first grade. And so the breaks at this point do make a difference because our students are really struggling in many cases. Some were very disengaged for a variety of different reasons last year, or may have been on, but video wasn't on. And then just the way that we teach with my example of foundational skills was difficult to do that virtually. So there is some reteaching after breaks, but mostly centered on routines and procedures. After summer, there is some of that, but in the past, we'd been able to just close those gaps through acceleration, small group, instruction. The way we've had to try to close those gaps now, we've really had to rethink how we do that.
Principal Diner.
Thank you, President Rice, Board of Directors. First off, a very nice job of our students presenting. Very proud of both the Ike and Davis students doing a wonderful job in a public meeting. To answer the original question, Raymond, for the high school part, traditionally we would have a longer period of reteach or assessing where our students are at when we have a longer break. So the 3-month summer break, you could see classes typically a couple weeks into the first semester, reteaching and assessing where our students are at and what skill levels they have. Now we do have the complex situation with COVID and the remote learning and more learning loss over the last couple of years with the disruption of the traditional school day. And so I think what Valeria said, that some classes could be still reteaching or trying to connect students with standards that they did not receive the last couple of years, it could go into a month or so. And so Valeria, this is unique times, but traditionally it's about 2 weeks. What you asked about 2-week or 3-week vacation, traditionally when we are coming out of Christmas break, there might be a day or two of review, but our teachers are pretty much getting ready for finals, which would be 2 weeks after Christmas usually. And so the Christmas break is usually 1 to 2 days of review, get ready, preparation for finals. As far as the modified calendar goes, and I'll speak for the committee, we're not opposed to the calendar. It's we do feel that there's a lot of merit. I think there's a lot of questions still to ask. Intersessions, we're still working on getting data from our intersessions and seeing how those can play a major part in keeping the student summer melt or the student learning loss to a minimum and getting kids up to speed. But I really, again, proud, and I haven't seen their presentation before. And so those are some interesting data points that the students gave us today. And I'm sure Bill and Maria and I will take that back to our team and share those when we start looking at calendars. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Principal Diner. Are there any other board members that have questions or comments from the student presentation or of our? All right, I see Sydney and Connor have raised their hands. Sydney?
Yeah, I just had one question for Maria. Whenever you were talking about the elementary students and having those breaks, were you saying that the breaks were positively or negatively affecting the students?
Currently, I would say any time away from school is not helping them grow. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Connor?
Thank you, President Rice. Just for a comment on some of the points that Principal Dinah was making. Thank you for noting those, especially regarding intersessions. Over the last week, I've had the opportunity to research this issue on the modified calendar more deeply, and in conversations with other staff and students, some of the data that I've seen regarding the efficacy of intersessions at Davis High School is somewhat discouraging, with only 25% participation and attendance at the lowest rates. And so I think that should prompt some more assessment from the staff level, looking at whether expanding intersession time in a modified calendar would perhaps be the most effective way, or there's a different way to approach intersessions to make sure that we're reaching the most challenged students in those areas.
Thank you, Connor. Any questions or comments from board members?
No questions for me, but just want to thank the students here today and all the students who provided feedback. It's really helpful for the board to hear directly from you. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was well put together, and I really heard a lot of passion in your presentations, and so I really appreciate that you brought that passion and the level of interest and interest that you brought to this topic. It's a really challenging topic for the board. We've been talking about it for a long time. It really is helpful to have all of your perspectives. So thank you so much for giving us such thoughtful and reflective and deep feedback from yourselves and the other students whose voices you presented to us today. So thank you so much for all of that.
Thank you, Graciela. Any other comments or questions from board members?
I do have one, and maybe a question as well, but I just want to thank the student voice, the student committee. Awesome job. I really appreciate the qualitative data you presented, because oftentimes I focus on quantitative data, right? And so that was very helpful. You were able to help me expand my thinking in terms of the impact of this decision, right? Not only on students and schools and families, but our community as well. What is it going to do? This decision is going to cause a lot of change that perhaps people are not ready for. It's going to interrupt families. It could possibly interfere with employment and jobs and income. And so I do appreciate the student committee and for shedding the light for me on that. My question is in regards to the quantitative data and the research you've done, what did you find in terms of research studies supporting one approach or one model over the other? Was there conclusive evidence that supports one or the other? So that's my question.
Yes, there was 3 options that were given throughout the Google Docs survey. It was, do you prefer the original calendar that we have now of 11 weeks? Do you prefer a 45-15, which is 9 to 8 weeks? And then there's a 45-10, or I'm sorry, switch that. The 45-15, which is cutting the summer in half, and then the 45-10, which is just taking away 2 or 3 weeks from the summer and applying it to other ways of like putting in breaks, like for fall or an extensive spring break. It wasn't as liked by the student body, the 45-15, just because it's a very daunting thought, taking away half a summer. The sound of it just sounds extensive, and it affected a lot of students in a negative manner. But they were explained, and it was just so that they could take away parts of the summer to add more break throughout the year. They ended up compromising and saying that if we were to have a schedule change, they would definitely prefer the 45-10, because there would be still a lot of summer for jobs and spending time with family or other activities they have during the summer, and only taking away a couple weeks to add it, and it would benefit them for finals or spring break or other times, was definitely something that they were intrigued by and they were more open to listening to. So if any calendar would have any change or impact in a positive manner, it would definitely be the 4510, just taking off a couple weeks in the summer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Connor, you've raised your hand.
And if I may just extend on Valeria's comments there regarding the local data we collected. With regards to any national studies, we did not do much research into that because we're laser focused on the local impacts, particularly regarding student voice. Of course, the National Association for Year-Round Education has done studies on this, and that's been covered in previous modified calendar summits. So I can't speak as much to any formal studies from other educational institutions on the matter, but it's certainly something that we can be looking into in the future. We were primarily focused on looking at what our students and what our local data would be telling us on this issue.
Thank you, Connor. Any other questions or comments from board members?
Well, I'd just like to thank our students for the effort you put into gathering and compiling and presenting the data, and also for your individual efforts to state points of view that you're hearing from your fellow students and from yourselves. So it's very thoughtful and very well put together presentation, and thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Norm. Anyone else?
Madam President, I would echo Norm and say thank you to the student reps for their personal and collective voice. And going back to something we discussed with Mr. Scambaluri at the retreat, maybe there's an opportunity to expand on this at our upcoming retreat in March, because it's really valuable information and context. So thank you all very much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. I have a couple of questions for the staff contingent within the calendar committee. I noticed on the calendar that all of the intersession time is tied to holidays or current vacations. Was there any thought given to just having intersessions kind of at the end of the quarter so that students could use that time to catch up or make up some of their learning? Go ahead, Will.
Unmute my camera and unmute my mic. That helps people speak clearly for the rest of the people. Not wanting to steal any time from the folks that were on the committee, but I want to say we considered about 10 different calendar options, from the 45-15 that the students were referring to, 45-10, breaks at quarter, breaks before winter breaks, tied to, we looked at just about every kind of possibility. And so just I want the board to understand that this was, we looked at the year-round education research, much like the students kind of went through their process this evening and summarized. We had a similar process where we reached out to as many of our people that would provide feedback to ask what would they like to see, what challenges would they see with the different committee or with the different calendars, and took that feedback and then tried to build something that took everyone's interests into consideration, and that's what we ended up with. I think Principal Diner's comments about the committee arriving at where they arrived, to try to take everybody's thoughts into consideration. It's not that anybody on the committee was opposed to talking about this or moving the calendar in this direction, but that it was it's a big bite to take in one chunk. So I think continuing to consider incremental movements towards something that's going to be beneficial for kids and looking at our intersession data is a critical component that we're going to have to consider if we want to continue this initiative. Just my thoughts.
Thank you, Will. The other question I have is, has to do more with what suggestions would either staff or students have for sharing information with our school families or with the community as to informing them of what they would think as to the changes to the calendar. I know that we had a thought exchange, but I'm not sure that folks had enough time to research calendars or to get information about alternative calendars. Sydney.
I think as students, whenever we were doing the polls and gathering our own information from our colleagues, I think what we found the most helpful to explaining what the calendars are, how it's different from the calendar right now, is actually showing the physical pie charts of the 45-15 and 45-10, because those pie charts on the slideshow do specifically show, hey, this is how it's broken down. This is how many weeks of summer you're going to be getting. This is how much time your winter break is. This is how much time your spring break is. I think that is the best possible way to explain what the modified calendar could be. It could be sent out via email or mailed to homes, but I believe that that is something that we have seen that has been really impactful to getting that information across correctly.
Thank you, Sydney. Any input from staff in that regard? Principal Hilton.
You know, several schools did hold parent nights to try to get the information out. And the district had it, of course, on the website. Personally, I thought it was hard to find. Could have been easier, but they were not well attended. We really put it out there, so we thought people would want information or at least want some input. But I think we had 25, 26 parents. I don't know how many Maria had. I don't think she had a whole lot more. And the high schools, they did them together and they weren't well attended either. But we invited parents to come in to get some information and actually put input. You might ask to see how many they got too. We did our own in middle school, but wasn't a lot. I'll let John or Eric talk about what he found with his parents. If they weren't not well attended, or people were not on board yet, even with the information.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, the high schools went together, Ike, Davis, Stanton, and online, and we had roughly under 10, maybe 12 people attend the session. The common theme that we found in our session talking to the parents was a lot of confusion the parents had. They don't know the difference between a modified calendar, which is still 180 school days, just more breaks, like the students say the 45-10 or the 45-15. They were thinking it was year-round school, where we would have 220 days and the students would be in the classroom longer. And so there was a lot of confusion with our community based on year-round and what is a modified or a balanced calendar. Again, the numbers were low. Like I said, it was very low for having all 4 of our high schools presenting at the same time. Maria, I think you had your hand up.
I would just add in terms of like what could be done. I think we need to go out to the families. I know that that's challenging right now with COVID. I always think about my dad. He's just a few blocks away from me. My dad doesn't read in English or Spanish. My dad is not familiar with our educational system. So he's always a person that I will just talk to and explain the way I would to any of my parents. And it's hard for him to envision and to really try to understand what we're trying to do. And I don't think that he is the only person with that type of background. And so I think that we need to regroup and really either go out when we can and just take a sampling and ask and try to inform, try to really get what are their genuine questions, what are your concerns. I think we need to go to families that have kids at different levels, elementary, middle, and high, and ask them, you know, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Well, one, explain, and then what questions do you have? What barriers do you see? What struggles would you face? Of course, the traditional coming to the school, but oftentimes the people that are coming to the school is the same group of families, and we greatly appreciate their input. But I think that we need to get a greater scope in terms of the feedback.
Thank you, Maria. I have Luana and Connor, I think, who have raised their hands.
Yes, so I want to just add on something that besides getting our input from students, we want to make sure we also get input from teachers as well, since they are the ones that are, in other words, running our educational system. So, and without them, we won't have school. So having teachers have input on this would greatly benefit this calendar.
Thank you, Luana. Connor?
And yes, thank you, President Rice. Just to echo what Luana was saying there, you know, I've had the opportunity to discuss this with a few different staff members at Davis, and they've mentioned that they've only gotten one email from any district staff member on the balanced calendar. So I think there can be a much better job done with just reaching out to staff members, even via conventional methods, via email, and engaging them in this process and getting their feedback. Overall, you know, we haven't had a community forum on this, unlike the last board election or other equity policy. When we were very transparent in the process behind that. We reached out to numerous different groups. We did consultations with the University of Washington. We did this work with the Superintendent Student Advisory Council. We did the work with faith leaders, the business community, other partners in our district. And that's something that I don't think we've seen yet during this process, and that we would need to see. For example, a community forum that would allow parents to voice their perspectives on this issue, that would allow them to engage with other district stakeholders and senior leadership on this. Other methods including school-based outreach directly from local building leaders as well, not just from the district. And being able to engage those diverse voices, I think, would be very important.
Thank you, Connor and Luana. Valeria?
Oops, sorry. Yeah, I just want to speak up and like continue what Connor's saying. The importance of this calendar doesn't just affect students and teachers. The students have families who go on vacation. These families have other people who need to visit others across a country or the state, or visit for family reasons, medical reasons. There's so many aspects and conclusions to the summer that the students need, and it's very difficult to just analyze one piece of data from such a small source. We outreached as much as possible. We had 52 students from the Google Docs, which is quite a lot more than we thought we would get. But it isn't enough. We need to speak up and reach out to as many people as possible. But we are so limited because just as students, we need help from others who can reach out to the rest of the community, adults who can spread the word and engage with the rest of the community to understand and instill in them that this is something that everybody needs to focus on, because this will impact the entire school system. This will impact students, parents, everybody. And this isn't something that we should be taking like very lightly and to just keep it within us. It is something that needs to be shared, and not just emailed, but broadcasted. I've informed like some of my parents and my aunts, and they work in the school district as teachers and in other school districts. And they gave me their feedback, and it was interesting and it was very eye-opening to hear what they had to say. It's also because some of the teachers who work in this district, they didn't know about this. And the lack of information that was spread about this subject was minimal. We need to have more information like this, especially for more agendas in the future, shared and expressed to the rest of the community. And I think it's very vital and very important that we do that.
Dakari and then Connor.
Just to add on to what Valeria is saying, I think we could do mass emails like maybe every other day or so, just to make sure students have access to like filling out said form or document or something that they can voice their opinion on how they feel about the changed calendar. And I also think it is important to involve teachers in this sort of thing, because if they have students out of district or they have kids out of district, their calendar would be different than theirs if that school does a different one, and it would mess with their schedule and they wouldn't be able to provide their full time with their students. And I think we can just really try to talk to parents about getting involved with like meetings and stuff with teachers and parent conference meetings or just something like that, just so they have more of an opinion. And sorry, there's also parents who may not be able to attend for certain reasons, like to those meetings because of family issues, or they're just not doing too well that day and they may not want to come or see other people. But yeah, totally what Valeria is saying makes sense. Thank you.
Connor?
Thank you. And I think we've touched on the very important family considerations at play, the social development, how students learn to interact in the greater cultural environment with their families, and having those social opportunities, having travel, having clubs and sports during the summer. But I think one of the pieces that also needs to be equally, if not emphasized more, is the district's partnership with the local business community. We have a lot of students. I hear every day every week in my advisory class, students who are working on their own. They have stable jobs, and they're working to support their families. And how a balanced calendar shift modified calendar shift would impact the local business community, their expectations from youth employment, and then from students' perspectives themselves, with how they're trying to support their loved ones. They're trying to make money for themselves as they are enjoying their youth, and connecting that to our predominantly agricultural-based community, with seasonal agriculture and really the bedrock of our local Yakima economy, how this would impact that. And again, we had that kind of exchange with the equity policy, even though that wasn't probably wasn't such a direct impact between an equity policy and the business community as there is here, with a balanced calendar completely changing the duration of summer and the different lengths at which students would be able to work and be able to take advantage of opportunities on their own, and businesses being able to support their own bottom lines and support the economic development of our valley.
Thank you very much for that input. Clearly, we have some more work to do when it comes to outreach to our communities and families. Any other comments from board members?
Yes, Martha, I just wanted to mention that I know about I think it's been 5 years that the board had asked for some research regarding the modified calendar, and I think we have the answer. We have, again, the quantitative data that shows that doesn't show that one traditional is better than the modified or yields better academic or educational achievement, and vice versa, right? There's what I've heard over the last few weeks and month, that the research doesn't show that. And so, so I think we got the answer to that. And also I know the board takes into account feedback from Thought Exchange, from our student group today and from our community. And we're hearing that the majority, again, I don't have a way to quantify that, but the majority are not in support of the modified calendar at this time because it possibly causes too much a disruption in our families, in our homes, in our community, in schools, and so forth. So, however, the problem still exists, right? That there are some racial and income inequalities in student achievement. So, what are we going to do about that? Is what I'm thinking now, because I'm past the modified school calendar now. What are we going to do to address that issue? What are we going to do to close those achievement gaps? So I know that the modified calendar alone doesn't help. It helps to address it, but alone it doesn't. It's not going to close those achievement gaps. So so I would be interested not only in hearing all the more of the discussion we've been having and the communicating with our community, get further feedback, but I'm just curious about what are some new perhaps innovative ways, right, that we can implement in the school district that can close those gaps. That if we keep doing what we're doing, we're gonna, I don't know who said that, but if we keep doing what we're doing, we're gonna keep getting the results. And I've been on the board, I know I received a certificate for 10 years, but it's been more than that. And every year it's the results are that heart rate monitor results. One year we're up, but we're still way below the state average. The next year we're down and we're way below the state average. The next year we're up and it just keeps going up and down. So we need to figure out a way to change that. We're seeing that trajectory, that we're seeing that increase. And perhaps a modified school calendar is one of the ways, but I think we need to start expanding our thoughts, our approach to include, other things as well, curriculum, individual school calendars and schedules. And there's so many things. It's a very complex issue and I don't even want to get into that. So I just wanted to make that comment. So thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. Valeria.
Yeah, I just want to make my final thoughts before I leave. Me and Connor have been working on this for the last few weeks, and especially we have been working on this Google slide for like a good amount of time, both of us, especially him. He's put in a lot of work and thought and effort. We were addressing areas of concern and what this calendar will do to the district positively and negatively from this point of the student perspective. And I feel we need to address student perspective, and it has really been a blessing, and it's been eye-opening that the district has really taken into consideration our voice and has really put its thought into what we have to say and our opinion. And it's really been a great experience to learn and understand the ways that the school board works, so then we can take this experience and share it to the rest of the students. Because what we've done so far is we've listened, we've gathered this information, and we shared it across as many people as we can with our friends, and they've shared it with theirs throughout social media, which is a great campaign to use. And it has gotten so much feedback, and a lot of people have put in their thoughts. And it's really been a great experience and a learning process. And I'm just thankful that we got to understand and you got to listen to our perspective and hear what we had to say.
Thank you, Valeria. I appreciate everyone's time today. This has been a very informative discussion for the board. And you gave us a lot to think about as we move forward. And I appreciate the thoughtful responses that you've made. We do need to move on, otherwise we'll be here for the rest of the night. And Thank you to staff and thank you to students who have weighed in on this discussion. We very much appreciate your input. As you know, we are scheduled to discuss this at the business meeting next Tuesday. And we'll see what that discussion brings. But thank you so much for your time this evening. We appreciate everything that you've done to help inform the board. This is not a one and done discussion. And I expect that we'll be talking about this for the next little while. Once again, thank you for your comment and thank you for your suggestions on how to get this information out to our community. And if you want to stay on for the rest of the meeting, we appreciate that. We only have a couple more things to take care of. And we understand if you have other things tugging on your shirt tails that are saying, pay attention to me. But I think that will close out our discussion on this for tonight. As always, if you have other things to share with the board, feel free to email us and let us know what your comments are. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next item on the agenda are review of what?
President Rice?
Yes.
Could I suggest a 10-minute break? Would that be in order?
We can do that. Okay. We've had our 10-minute break. And during that time, I've had a number of texts and a couple of phone calls. And I appreciate everyone with their concern for how I'm feeling. I am feeling okay. I just am dealing with, I think, a cold or something. So if we could just get through the rest of this meeting, then I can go pour myself into the recliner and we can deal with this at another time. So thank you everyone for expressing your concern. Next we have a couple of board policies to discuss. 1000.3.2 board job descriptions. Do I have a board member that would volunteer to lead the discussion on board job description?
Sure. Board job description is the policy that outlines our jobs as board members. The key function of our board is to represent the community and lead the district by determining and requiring appropriate and excellent organizational performance. We act on behalf of our community to govern responsibly. We employ and evaluate the superintendent, and we are committed to excellence in governance. We create the conditions for student and staff success, reflecting local circumstances and creating an environment designed to ensure that all students have the opportunity to realize their maximum potential. We set high expectations for student learning. We believe that all students can learn and that each student's learning can improve regardless of circumstances or resources. We establish written policies and categories that address the broadest levels of organizational decisions and situations, which are our ends and goals policies, which is the organizational products, impacts, benefits, outcomes, recipients and their relative worth, executive limitations, the constraints on the superintendent's authority, governance process, which is how the board conceives, carries out, and monitors its own work, and the board to superintendent linkage policies, how power is delegated and monitored to the superintendent. We also set expectations for accountability of staff learning. The board's accountability for student learning includes adoption of a system for monitoring continuous assessment of all conditions affecting education, including assessments for measuring staff and student progress toward goals. We keep the community informed. Community engagement, we serve as the education's key advocate on behalf of students in their schools. We work to advance the community's vision for its schools and to pursue district goals to encourage progress and energize systemic change, and to ensure that students are treated as whole persons in a diversified society. The board serves as a link between the community ownership and the district by reflecting the community's priorities and values and governing in a transparent manner. To distinguish the board's job description from the jobs of superintendent and staff, we define and require demonstration of accountability for successful organizational performance on ends, goals, and executive limitations. We initiate and set parameters for ballot initiatives and communicate the rationale for these measures to the community. We advocate for the district and the students it serves, including through legislative awareness, district's financial and other needs. We attend graduation ceremonies and other events that are important to the district and the community.
Thank you, Graciela. Do board members have any comments on this one, or do we need to have any recommended suggestions to it? Okay, seeing none. Barb, when can we expect the Survey Monkey?
I will have it out tomorrow on email and asking for it back the 11th, so it can be on the 15th board meeting.
All right, thank you so much. Next, we've got policy 1000.3.3, agenda planning. Do I have a board member who would volunteer to lead us through this?
I could do it, Martha.
Thank you so much.
Sure. So in order to accomplish the work of the board and be consistent with our governance style or policy and board policies, the board will examine student achievement as defined by the ends, goals, policies, organizational performance defined by the ELs or the executive limitations, board performance through board education and enrichment or enrich input and deliberation, and the ends, goals, policies will be reviewed and amended to align with the strategic plan. So there's a few different sections. The board's annual planning cycle will conclude each year at the end, on the last day of October of every year, so that administrative planning and budgeting, so there can be some consistency there. The cycle will start with the board's development of its agenda for the next year and will include consultations with selected groups in the community or methods of gaining community ownership, input, board development and training, schedule monitoring reports, and superintendent contract renewal and conditions. So basically that's agenda planning.
Thank you, Raymond. Are there any comments or suggestions for changes on this policy?
Yeah, I was just looking at 2.1, 2.2. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't recall us doing that. actually at the beginning of the year, scheduling consultations, or what we used to call the community linkages, setting that up and arranging those for the first quarter, and also determining what board development and trainings that will be. It's usually kind of after that, after the year gets started, or as the need arises. So I don't know if we need to change that, or either way, I'm okay. So.
Well, we have taken advantage of having a discussion at the beginning of the school year or at the August retreat for professional development or training opportunities that board members would like to participate in. But we haven't done any community linkages for a couple of years now because of the limitations on meeting with large groups or community groups because of the pandemic. Hopefully we can figure out a way to reach out to them by the end of summer or the beginning of the school year. And if board members have suggestions for how to do that, I'd be interested in hearing them.
Well, I guess my point, Martha, is, and I understand those challenges, but my point is, I'm not sure the board does this in a planning session prior to the year starting. And I may be wrong, but that's what I interpret this policy to say, that policy to indicate that the board will meet and determine whether, one, will we meet with any of the community groups, one, and if we say yes, then when will we meet with them? So, and put that into a planning or an annual planning calendar, which I'm not sure if we have a calendar that is labeled as such. So, and then also the board development and training, I'm not sure we do the same thing at the beginning of the year. Determine what type of training or development the board needs and then plan for that prior to the year starting. So that was my point.
Okay. Let's do this. When we get these two policies for our input in the monitoring, in the policy review, let's make sure to capture those comments and we can talk about them when we take care of the discussion about whether we need to have additional discussion about them. Okay. Any other comments?
We do have a calendar post on Board Docs that has all of the professional development with all of the committee meetings that we do approve at the beginning of the year. It has all of our regular school board meetings, and it also has like the WASDA conferences, just all the different conferences, the NSBA Advocacy Institute. So that is posted on, that was the working, what I was trained to be called the working calendar that we approved at the beginning of the summer, and it is posted on Board Docs.
Thank you, Barb. Any other comments from board members? Okay, Mr. Superintendent, do we have a need for executive session?
We do not have need for an executive session this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in there. I know it's been an extra long meeting, but I very much appreciate the conversations that we've had tonight. And I think we can identify those areas where we need more discussion. So thank you, everyone. We appreciate your time tonight. and have a great rest of your week. Thanks so much.
Thank you.